We're going to focus on 3 stories every week. You'll get 2 opinions, one from each of us on those topics, sometimes aligned, sometimes less so, I think, based on our conversations in the build-up to this. And then we'll try and summarize things into one useful takeaway as far as possible, but if nothing else, kind of distill our thoughts.
Ryan, what are you doing here?
Well, I thought the last thing the world needs is another new podcast, so why not co-opt an existing one?
Yeah, absolutely. And you have done. Not under duress, by the way. You're not here under duress, and neither am I. So I'd like to welcome you to Construction Disrupted, the podcast, first and foremost. But
Thank you very much.
It is absolute pleasure to have you on board. But I want to say right from the start, this is as much your podcast as it is mine. I've just done the previous 84 episodes by myself and built up a database of people and listeners and things like that. And then you jump on. But let's move that to one side and let's focus on the future.
Very much the Ruud van Nistelrooy of construction podcasters.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, welcome. And you like I say, it's as much your podcast as it is mine. And I'm delighted to get your insights and knowledge on the stuff we're going to be covering.
No, I'm really looking forward to it. There's no shortage of things to cover either, is there, in this one? Worth explaining the new format for anyone that's been listening for a while?
I think it is. Do you want to do that?
Well, for anyone watching on YouTube, we've probably given the game away somewhat, but for anyone on the podcast side of things, we've been talking for a little while about how to make this sort of informative but snappy. So we've decided between us, for all the things going on within the sector, we're going to focus on 3 stories every week. You'll get 2 opinions, one from each of us on those topics, sometimes aligned, sometimes less so, I think, based on our conversations in the build-up to this. And then we'll try and summarize things into one useful takeaway as far as possible, but if nothing else, kind of distill our thoughts. I think what we've been finding when we've been talking is that there's often through lines on these things. And so, we'll do our best to summarize and give you something to take away for the week, and see you back here next time for more of the same.
Yeah, thanks, and goodbye from both. Oh no, we need to keep it. Right, okay. Let's get into this. And I think your first time. Well, no, is it the second, third, fourth, fifth time on the podcast? I forget because you've been a guest, but you're the other side of the mic this time. First news story, I think we'll cover, and I'll let you lead on this. But it's the new town scheme that Parliament is proposing. But I think you're more aligned to these type of topics than I am. So yeah, I'll let you lead on this one.
Well, how do you start with anything other than build, baby, build? If we've learned anything from public discourse and politics over the last decade, it's stick on a red baseball cap, have a catchy slogan, and you are very much at the races. So obviously, not to cover masses of old ground, but following the resignation of Angela Rayner as Deputy PM, housing community is also falling under her remit, and therefore giving at least part of the sector an airing at top table within cabinet. Steve Reid is the new broom in, and obviously, I don't know how much you kept an eye on the conference that's going on, very much on your patch, Mr. Sumpton. But there's it feels like the continuation candidate in some respects, in that you're very quick to praise Angela Rayner and the work that she's done. It seems like business as usual. The 1.5 million homes target hasn't been altered at all. They seem very much wedded to that, which obviously we'll come back to a bit later on. But the big headline, as you say, one of the means of which they are going to chase down this 1.5 is through the introduction of 12 new towns. Something Labour governments have done successfully in the past. It's something that has been, been planned for some time. Obviously, the launch of this 12 particular sites is the big news. But yeah, this has been something that's been in the works for a little while, and people kind of had a sense was coming. But it's big news. They're promising spades in the ground, or shovels in the ground, for at least 3 of those sites within the next 4 years by the end of this Parliament. One of the things I found interesting, again, my maths isn't phenomenal, but I saw a report from Savills a couple of weeks back that, again, of this much-trailed 1.5 million homes, they're estimating at current level, we're looking just over 800,000 over the 5-year period. So a little bit over half of that target. I don't know how much this accelerates towards that number. Again, Steve Reid seems very confident in, things are going to improve, that what you're seeing at the minute in terms of low levels of activity is as a result of planning over the last 18 months, that things washing through the system, but that should accelerate pretty quickly. Let's see if they can stick to that.
So those three new town schemes that are proposed during the current parliamentary term: Bedfordshire, North London, and Leeds.
Mm-hmm.
In reading this, and we chatted very briefly on this, is that the cynical eye says that you look at where these new towns are proposed. Is it population based? Is it purely on where you can fit these into an island, if you like? But we were very south heavy, and it almost feels like Leeds has been shoved in there just to keep the north happy. What's your take on where these actual locations are?
I think, again, so additional detail I think would welcome. One of the big things that stuck out for me, and obviously massively topical given all the headlines about Mr. Burnham in the last couple of weeks. Obviously, my agency SLG being based in Manchester, you tend to keep an eye on things on patch. One of the sites that they're included within the 12 is what I think they're calling it Victoria North. Something Andy Burnham also included within his 10-year plan for Manchester, launched last month. So maybe a little bit akin to previous government's plans for hospitals, where actually once you got beneath the detail, there wasn't quite the number of new hospitals being promised. A lot of them were, refurbishment to existing or things that were already in planning. So, I think devil's in the detail with these things always, isn't it? I think it'd be really, really fascinating to see were these sites already earmarked for development, how far things have progressed. I think there's clearly a need to balance. We need more homes for myriad reasons. NIMBYism always plays a part. So again, I don't know if these sites have been earmarked because of a lack of people in proximity and therefore less people to complain about planning and so on. Watch this space, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that interests me is, it's a great way to increase capacity for homes. And if you've got a target for building homes, then, fantastic way to do that. Rather than look for smaller locations, why not just build new towns and which are obviously going to need housing? I think there's obviously huge things to get through before anything actually happens, but it's almost okay. So we're building these new homes in new towns, but there's going to be a sustainable aspect to that that's going to be a huge consideration. Depending on where these sites are, I'm guessing they're not going to be in city centre locations. And by that I mean, it's going to be green, if not brownfield sites. That's my guess. So there's sustainability, but there's also that affordability element to it.
Well, just to interject, mate, I think a combination thereof. Certainly the Victoria North site in Manchester that I mentioned is a very urban environment. Hence the name. It's anyone that knows the city, it's close to Victoria Station. The sort of green quarter heading out towards Cheetham Hill. So I think probably a mix of the two, and I think you probably need a mix of the two on that basis. If you think of, we need more homes, but the mix of homes needed to kind of cater to the communities that require them. I think you couldn't do it with one. With respect to the new homes, the new towns rather built post-war, there was a very definite need to rehouse people where, cities had been bombed, and therefore moving people out of urban environments and so on meant a certain type of location with a certain type of community built. I think our needs are they're so diverse and so myriad now that you probably can't take a one-size-fits-all approach to it. I think that the need is so broad that, build, baby, build wherever there's a space and the ability to do so.
Yeah, and that leads us nicely on to second topic, which is transportation. And I think, first of all, before we dive into things on this, I just want to interject with two kind of key phrases which we've spoken about in the past. And that's number one, Northern Powerhouse, and number two, mega projects. Okay, so I'll take on mega projects, and there's been the debate to what is a mega project, how do you define that, and all that kind of jazz. But at the end of the day, it's very much about the output from that project, whether it be mega or not. The definition, I think, for the people that we're building and creating and designing these things for, not that fussed if it's called mega project. It probably gives more kudos, but just give us some transportation, give us some houses. It doesn't really affect them. But I know you've got certain opinions on the phrase Northern Powerhouse as well. So what's your take on this?
Well, it's stuck, hasn't it? So I guess on that basis, you argue that it's a success. I found it phenomenally patronising when it was first. I think it was Osborne and Cameron where the phrase kind of came from, and it stuck. But it stuck for it's used as a catch-all now, seemingly for any kind of central government development that happens north of Watford, just falls under this kind of Northern Powerhouse scheme. Yeah, the rail aspect, and as you rightly say, great that we're building these homes. They have to be communities. They have to be connected. There's a lot of amenity required, and transport is an integral part of that. I saw a stat a few years back that I think north of 80% of the existing railway lines that we have were built during the Victorian era or laid during the Victorian era. So, and this is before we get into HS2, an example of a mega project that wasn't quite delivered in quite the style that it was supposed to. But I guess that part of the reason that we're talking about this goes back a couple of weeks to another party conference, Reform, where the deputy leader, Richard Tice, steps up to the lectern and kindly informs those of us in the sector that may have an interest in the project not to bother, because if that party takes power, then Northern Powerhouse Rail will be kaput, which I don't think is phenomenally helpful. I think if you use the term mega project or any kind of project of a certain scale, the lead times involved, there's elements of what would be, constituent parts of Northern Powerhouse Rail that are out at tender currently. If you're a business that is looking to forecast into the future and whether or not, even tendering for the work is viable and how one might get involved in the delivery of that, someone is potentially going to be a deputy leader in government telling you not to bother. Does that give you reason to sort of think twice maybe and pull out any potential tenders? I don't know how you feel about that.
I think just to highlight what we're talking about here is that Northern Powerhouse Rail, it's been reportedly pushed back again by the government, but they're saying it will go ahead, which seems something that happens quite frequently with these large projects that push back an escalation of costs and things like that, which in our industry, I mean, it's almost forgivable because of increasing prices and just the weather and things like that. So I very much feel that like you're in the middle between Liverpool and Manchester. I'm the Liverpool side. Go to Manchester on the train. It takes about 40 minutes from Lime Street to Victoria. And I think you look at what we've spoken about in terms of housing, and you look at new housing being built, and you look at the urbanization and how, particularly in Manchester, there's this huge sprawl going on, and they're not reducing the numbers in city centres. It's increasing, particularly within Manchester. So it is going to need better links. But it's like, I think that they're proposing about 1.5 billion and to start work by 2030. I mean, that's 5 years away, 4 years away. A lot can happen in 4 years to get this up and running. And then you look at HS2 and the instability with government at the moment, and then you throw in the mix, like you rightly said, with Reform, saying don't bother, or certainly don't put your tenders in. It's a whole mixed bag of, like, you just want some almost concrete answers of this is going to be the process of what's going to happen within your area.
Yeah, no, and as you said, the uncertainty really isn't helpful. I think one of the, whatever your political sort of allegiances are, I think one of the more disappointing aspects of HS2 not being delivered, obviously we should point out HS2 is being delivered, just not quite to the scale it was with the cancellation of the northern leg, and whether or not it actually ends up in London or not. But I think one of the more disappointing things with that was that there was cross-party consensus on that for decades. And the message, I'll link that to the potential, push, but certainly pushing back the potential cancellation wholesale of Northern Powerhouse Rail. We start to send a message out to the public who don't pay attention to the detail of these things and don't have quite the same sort of reason to as you or I would. The headlines are just negative, that the sector can't deliver. They're not going to get into the nuance of why, or why things may not be viable, as you say, or things may have changed. the headlines that come out are that we cannot build.
Yeah.
It kind of links back to house building as well, doesn't it? Because, and again, we should remind people, the 1.5 million homes target that the government are targeting, previous governments have also chased the same figure. And our need for housing has kind of been pretty constant at that sort of level. Every time we miss one of those figures and it starts to resonate with the public, or one of these mega projects, as you say, doesn't happen on time, doesn't happen on budget, or doesn't happen at all, it's not a great look for us as a sector. And particularly at the minute, we should be absolutely basking in the fact that, construction is front and center of the nation's economic sort of prosperity and plans going forward. And we can't fail. I know that sounds really alarmist and possibly a bit sort of hyperbole laden, but if the sort of economy, and if people are going to feel sort of generally better off, construction has to deliver. Like we do not have a choice. So and I think we can. There are enough people that seem to be energized at the minute. I think taking the government and others at their word. I'm looking at the data from the likes of Glenigan and Barber. Pipeline looks phenomenally healthy in terms of things at an early stage. How quickly can you make that happen? Whether it's infrastructure, whether it's housing, just build, baby, build.
We're back to build, baby, build, aren't we? I think there's that fine balance with what's happening politically at the moment. With, do we have the budget and that positivity for big, large scale projects, mega projects, and that balance? It's it's that escalation of costs, which HS2 and I know we've come back to that again, but your fingers are burnt and you read the headlines as a commuter, and you're like, well, whatever rail project is coming out is going to be over budget. It's going to be delayed because that's just the rail network, and there's that air of cynicism. But I think internally as well, it's like, can we afford it? Do we say these positive things, or do we push it back to make sure we can afford it? And yeah.
Well, Dan, to draw it back to our day jobs, I think a lot of that is message management. One of the things with HS2 that I think still persists to this day is people fundamentally misunderstanding the purpose of that project in the first place. If I had £1 for everyone that said, I don't need to get to London 10 minutes quicker than I currently do, I wouldn't be doing this podcast. I'd be long retired. And I think the same with these kind of big infrastructure projects, particularly. And I guess, the new towns as well, to a certain extent. If you want to reduce that NIMBYism, provide the context. Why do we need these homes? Why this particular location? What's going to be provided alongside, etc. Whether it's the Liverpool and Manchester leg or Northern Powerhouse Rail as a complete project. What is that going to provide? How is that connectivity between those cities going to improve things economically and so on? I think, again, nerds like us that are in the sector, and it's important to us, we will take our time and read the detail and understand that. But I don't know that your average punter will, unless you reinforce that message. Again, we know we've been really flippant about build, baby, build, but catchphrases, snippets, soundbites, any kind of idiom that reinforces that kind of point, I think is probably a useful thing on balance. So I'm going to eat my words slightly in that, I don't particularly love Northern Powerhouse, but it's stuck and it works and it lands. Yeah. And I think, we need to be a bit more sort of brand construction conscious, I guess, and make sure that people understand the context of what is being created and why it's important.
Yeah, completely agree. And it's not it's not so much the detail, although that is important. I think there's two things going on there. One, it's that sense of knowing and being in control as like an individual, of knowing that this is going to be built and this is happening and this is where it's going to go and these are the stops and this is what happens, and that sense of understanding and being in control helps. But you're not really getting that, like, down to the being pushed back. You don't even know when it's going to start. You've got a year, 2030. But
well, one thing that I found interesting on that was I saw an interview with Steve Reed not long after he'd gotten the post of Housing and Communities Minister, and he was talking about what he did over the summer recess in Parliament. And it wasn't, knowing this reshuffle was coming or not, as the case may be, but it wasn't swatting up on sort of housing policy or anything like that. He was looking at communication styles He spent his summer learning what TikTok is and what a reel is, and sort of short form communication, which probably explains the kind of catchphrase politics and the soundbite politics and stuff, which I know I would bemoan, you would bemoan, and other people would. But I don't think any of this is accidental. So to that point of message management, perhaps they're already on it. Perhaps the pennies kind of dropped that. The policies are great and well intentioned and necessary, etc. But so is the delivery of the message around that. So, yeah, again on both topics, I think watch this space and see what happens.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move it on to the final headline, which is a complete sideways move here.
I know you're excited about this one as well.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's just such a cool story, and the visuals are unbelievable as well. So, while we're talking, I might actually try and do something crazy, which I've never tried, and try and get a photo up here. But this is the bottoming out ceremony, seeing a historical church in London on stilts, which sounds quite theatrical, and I suppose it is. But this is the 50 Fenchurch Street development in London, and this church is like 700 years old. Hence, they want to keep it where it is, but they want to develop around it. So, hats off to the engineers. They've found a way to put this church on stilts while they dig everything from underneath it, which was 60,000 square feet. They've dug into the site, and it's just, we look for positivity in the industry and why people need to be involved in this industry or why they can get in it, and the diversity which is within all jobs within the construction industry, and this just highlights it perfectly for me, by way of, we want, British Isles, UK, England, whatever you want to call it. We've got such a steep history compared to some other countries in the world, and you want to keep that, but you don't want to stop progress either. And this is just, for me, it's the beauty of construction all rolled into one.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think these are the kind of projects that we should absolutely be screaming about and boring to tears anyone that's kind of in our friends or family group. I think they're fascinating without you needing to know the full ins and outs of the project. I mean, I'm sure we can share links afterwards, but some of the images are absolutely stunning of this project. I'm mindful of there was the project last month, I think it was, in Sweden, the Kiruna Church, where they put the church on wheels, and it was like a 5-kilometer sort of movement from one side of the city to the other. I was glued to, there was a live stream there, perfect. I was glued to the live stream on the BBC, and again, we were vested interest in the sector and interested in it, but it's just a fascinating story in and of itself. I think of things of kind of like some of the pop science shows, your Brian Cox type stuff that kind of cross over into mainstream, and it's, you never need an in-depth knowledge of the topic. It's just that the surface level is so fascinating that, it's worthy of further exploration. And I think I would file this under that. I think this, this would be of interest to anyone. It's as a feat of engineering, that is pretty incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, and if you look at the end development as well, which I don't think is there, here. I think that's the church there at the bottom, and it's just, it keeps that historical content, and there's so much of that, particularly around London. There's so much of that they've brought into developments to try and keep that linked to the past, and I'm all for that. And I just don't think you can give enough credit to what it takes to devise something like that.
No, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, make sure it doesn't just collapse, No. And like you said, the moving of the building, it was last week or the week before. Again, check that out. I'll try and find a link and put it in the show notes. But it's just things like that you don't have to be on the ground. You don't have to be in a hard hat necessarily. There's just so many, and by that, I'm not being flippant saying that, but if you talk about construction with anyone, their first thought is building and being on a site and all that kind of stuff. But there's so much that goes pre and post the actual build, that, yeah, this is just have a look at this. And if that doesn't spark your interest in terms of what you can do in construction, we're fighting a losing battle, I feel.
Oh, I'm with you. I think, again, that we talked earlier about that, these things tend to link together and have a bit of a thread. I think it demonstrates, to your point, whatever the kind of local thing is, in this case, it's a heritage building, I would suspect listed, but then progress demands that further amenity or something is needed around that. The power of ingenuity and the brilliant people that exist within this sector to find a solution that meets both, that keeps that heritage, but also allows progress. Back to that earlier point on NIMBYism, where there are legitimate concerns about, it might be utility, amenity, it might be protection of the environment and wildlife when building these new towns or building these railway links, or in this case building commercial or mixed residential towers, whatever the project might be. There's a solution to it. It just needs properly thinking through, and I'm certain that we have enough talented people in the sector to be able to find means of satisfying both of those things at the same time. It's not progress for progress sake. It's not trampling over the legitimate concerns that people have about their local environment. It's finding a way to allow progress without putting anyone too far out of joint. And I think it's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great way to finish before we talk about takeaways. So what would be your number one takeaway this week?
I think so. I was reading an article this morning in Housing Today, which I think is kind of my takeaways. I think let's hold our nerve. I think it's, not to keep making this a politics podcast, but it's just topical at the minute with it being, conference season. Let's see. I think the energy from government seems decent. I think the noise from industry in response to what is being offered from government seems positive. I, like everyone else, would like to see some more progress, but I think, let's not talk ourselves into a doom spiral unnecessarily. Let's hold our nerve and see how it goes. How about you?
I mean, I've got to stick with the church, haven't I? Obviously, and isn't it? No, it's not about praying and hoping. It's it's very much, I suppose, don't take no for an answer. Like, some things might feel impossible, but try and look at things differently, through a different lens, from a different angle, and rather than having that negative, no, can't be done, just sit down, have a think, and there probably is a way of doing that particular thing that you haven't thought of yet, and it's probably more collaborative. You'll need a bucket load more people involved in it, but just that spark of, can we do this? Keep that going, regardless of where you are in your career or in life. Getting a bit poignant here, so bringing it back to the church, really.
Talk about message management. What a lovely message to end on, eh?
I think so, yeah. I'm not going to say any more, I don't think. I think I've done enough there. But positivity. Yes, absolutely. So, Ryan, will we see you next week then for this?
I think so. I mean, let's see how the feedback goes, but I'm up for it.
Sound right. Well, let's do it again next week then.
Good man. Cheers, Peter.